to it. Underdog WNBA. Here was put out. Remember, this is being put out by the WNBPA. This is on Underdog WNBA. Katie Barnes. WNBA generated enough revenue in 2025 to trigger revenue sharing with players for the first time. For the first time. Per Katie Barnes, teams will receive a pot of $8 million to be dispersed among players. So,
get this. $8 million is being split among 13 teams for the very first time in the entire history of the WNBA. The league has officially triggered its revenue-sharing model with the players, which is a massive milestone. After 28 long years of reporting financial losses, the owners are finally in a position where they have to cut checks back to the talent.
It was last year, and I make no mistake about it, this is off the back of Caitlin Clark. Even though she only played 13 games, Caitlin Clark put this league on her back, put them in the green for the first time. Y'all should be thanking her, okay? Instead, y'all want to flagrantly foul and take all these cheap shots. Let's get into this argument.
And if you listen to what the union leadership is saying, they believe this absolutely proves that the players deserve every single thing they're asking for in the upcoming CBA negotiations. They see this as validation of their worth and their contribution to the league's growth. But here's what makes this announcement particularly fascinating when you really dig into it. The timing of this release is just incredibly convenient, almost suspiciously so.
In the CBA, as the amount of revenue over a predetermined threshold minus 30% for expenses. Okay, and this is just a bunch of numbers talk. But Caitlin Clark, it appears the WNBA, this is the WNBPA side, again, Caitlin Clark has brought in enough dough to get these players paid extra money. Now, does this $8 million trigger thing, does this mean that the WNBA owner should be doing a 30% revenue share? Probably not. I mean, this doesn't say that. This doesn't say that this...
The WNBA has famously refused to show their actual financial statements to the public or even the players in full detail. And yet, there's one specific name that keeps getting conveniently left out of this entire celebration, almost like they're going out of their way to avoid saying it. This was a narrative building all of last year, and I make no mistake about it, the omission is intentional. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of this situation. That revenue threshold they're celebrating didn't just appear out of nowhere.
But yeah, I think this is definitely a tactic the players are using to, you know, make it seem like they should be getting more right now. I definitely believe this is a tactic being used in this current moment. But make no mistake about it, the players wouldn't be getting this or asking for all this if it were not for Caitlin Clark, because without Caitlin Clark, they would have never hit the threshold. If it wasn't for Caitlin Clark, they would never hit the threshold. Let's keep it real. You know what I'm saying? If we gonna do something, let's be for real.
It was set in the 2020 collective bargaining agreement based on 2019 revenue numbers that were supposed to be compounded by 20% each and every year to set the new bar. Then the COVID-19 pandemic hit and absolutely destroyed revenue streams in 2020 and 2021, making these financial targets seem completely impossible to reach. It looked like a pipe dream until last season, until one singular player changed everything about how America watches women's basketball, effectively smashing through the CBA's formula, which defines shared revenue as the amount over a predetermined threshold minus 30% for expenses.
They deserve their money. They deserve their cut.
Sure.
They've helped build this league into what it is. That's the one side. The other side is that the owners have been here too. And they're saying over a lengthy period of time, we've been losing money. We ain't trying to lose more. And that's where the lines are drawn in the sand. So what you have to ask yourself as ladies is, look at what you've built and look at all that's happening in the world of sports. Can you afford to jeopardize a season?
Yeah.
Because in the end, the owners who are not known, who are not in the public eye, who are not public faces for the league, they can sit back and say, hey, we got our money. We ain't trying to lose more. So it hurts the game and we can't make it, but we ain't trying to lose more anyway. You're ladies, you're trying to make this money and you're trying to build off the league. And my advice, and I've said this in the past, would be this. Continue to strive hard to get yours, be reasonable, understand where the lines are drawn in the sand and go from there. But a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah. Stephen A. Smith laid it out perfectly. Now, this doesn't explicitly state the cause, but ESPN's Katie Barnes broke this massive story on Sunday, citing union leadership as the primary source. The league apparently notified player representatives earlier this month that they had finally hit the benchmark. As a result, each of the 13 teams is set to receive approximately $615,000 to distribute among their rosters, which is a nice payday. But here is where it gets murky. When ESPN asked the WNBA to provide actual documentation to back this up, like the amount of actual revenue generated or even the specific number required to trigger the payment, the league completely declined to comment. They simply won't show the receipts to anyone. Think about what that silence actually means in this context.
This situation, and they definitely didn't want to ride the Caitlin Clark wave. They was jealous, envious, and being haters. We all know that. And here also in the statement, it says, this is a quote from Nneka Ogwumike, okay? It says, "We've grown as a union and put our name, image, and likeness into a collective package." WNBPA President Nneka Ogwumike said to ESPN, "The union exists for us to be able to represent all players. So I think it's a great way for all players to be able to share in the growth." Negotiations over a new CBA, which will begin in 2026 season, are ongoing. The latest players proposal will give the players 27.5%, yada, yada, yada. Nneka Ogwumike also said players do not want to strike. Nobody wants a work stoppage. But at the end of the day, we do have to be ready. So as we continue to negotiate, us being ready is imperative. It's fair to say that part of this announcement is
the Players Union is out here celebrating this moment as definitive proof that they deserve massive salary increases across the board. They are aggressively using this news as leverage in what are shaping up to be extremely contentious CBA negotiations, and yet the league itself won't even verify the actual numbers behind the announcement they just made. Brianna Turner, the WNBA treasurer, went on record telling ESPN that this payout proves their value and fully justifies what they're fighting for in the labor talks. Nneka Ogwumike, the union president, added that they've grown significantly as a union and have successfully put their name, image, and likeness into a collective package. She called it a great way for all players to finally share in the financial growth they've helped create.
Being ready and displaying that we are ready. Often things tend to get done at the 11th hour. That's what Adam Silver had to say. But it appears that Caitlin Clark has finally brought in enough money for this league after 29, nearly 30 years of these owners losing money. It only took Caitlin Clark 2 years to make them some money. Get down in the comments.
But I want you to notice exactly what is missing from both of those statements, because the silence is deafening. Notice who doesn't get mentioned even once when they talk about this historic, unprecedented growth. They talk about how they deserve their money, but they ignore the catalyst. Stephen A. Smith actually laid it out perfectly when discussing this. He acknowledged that the players absolutely deserve recognition for building this league over decades of hard work. He also pointed out that the owners have been here the whole time too, absorbing losses year after year to keep the lights on. Both sides have legitimate grievances and history here, but this isn't about who deserves credit for the past 28 years. This is specifically about what changed between the 2023 season and the 2024 season that suddenly made revenue sharing a reality. And that answer is singular, undeniable, and obvious to anyone with eyes. The 2024 season brought record television ratings, sold-out arenas across the country, unprecedented merchandise sales, and a level of mainstream media coverage the league had literally never experienced before. All of those metrics point back to one specific catalyst, the player who brought millions of casual sports fans into WNBA arenas for the first time, the rookie who made primetime games appointment viewing for the nation. Here's the uncomfortable truth that makes this announcement so incredibly politically charged. Without Caitlin Clark's massive impact on the 2024 season, the WNBA does not hit that revenue threshold. It's not even a debate. They wouldn't be close. The league had certainly been trending upward, with incredible stars like Aja Wilson, Brianna Stewart, and Sabrina Ionescu building a strong foundation. But the exponential leap, the rocket fuel that triggered this $8 million payout, happened specifically because one player brought millions of new eyeballs to the product. And yet, throughout the entire 2024 season, we watched a significant portion of the league treat that player with open hostility, delivering flagrant fouls that went way beyond competitive basketball, making dismissive comments about her popularity, with veterans questioning whether she truly deserved the attention, and media members writing think pieces about how her new fan base was problematic. The cognitive dissonance on display here is absolutely staggering when you really think about it. Now, those very same players who criticize the attention are using the financial success she generated as leverage to demand higher salaries and better conditions. And to be clear, that is their right. The players absolutely should negotiate for the best deal possible. But the way this announcement is being framed, as if the league collectively earned this through years of gradual grind, completely ignores the specific explosive circumstances that made 2024 different from every other year in WNBA history. The union's latest proposal is asking for a massive 27.5% of league revenue moving forward. They have made it clear they are prepared to strike, if necessary, to get it. Olga Womack told ESPN that nobody actually wants a work stoppage, but being ready for one is imperative for their strategy. She said this announcement is part of displaying that readiness to the ownership group. In other words, let's be real about what this is. This is a calculated negotiating tactic. You release the good news about revenue sharing to create public pressure on the owners and strengthen your bargaining position before getting to the table. Here's what makes this situation so incredibly complex and why it reveals deeper issues about how the WNBA operates as a business. The revenue sharing structure in the 2020 CBA gives players 50% of shared revenue, which is defined as the amount over a predetermined threshold minus 30% for expenses. That's actually a pretty reasonable framework on paper. The problem, as always, is transparency. The WNBA is a privately held entity. Unlike the publicly traded world, the league doesn't have to disclose financial information publicly, or even to the same degree the NBA does. So when union leadership announces they've triggered revenue sharing for the first time ever, and the league simultaneously refuses to provide documentation to back it up, we're supposed to just trust that both sides are being honest about the numbers. And we're supposed to do this in the middle of contentious labor negotiations where everyone is posturing. This is happening when both sides have a massive incentive to spin the narrative completely in their favor. The owners have historically claimed the league loses money every single year to keep expectations low. The NBA subsidizes operations to the tune of millions annually, which is a known fact, but we've never seen comprehensive financial statements that actually break down revenue sources, operating expenses, and actual losses line by line. We just get these vague assertions without any supporting evidence. Now, the players are claiming they've hit revenue targets that trigger profit sharing, but again, there is absolutely no documentation provided. There's no breakdown of what revenue streams contributed to hitting that threshold. There is no explanation of how much of the increase came from television deals versus ticket sales versus merchandise versus corporate sponsorships. It's just an announcement that it happened, followed by the league declining to comment further. This is the fundamental problem with the WNBA's entire business model right now. Neither side operates with full transparency, which makes it virtually impossible for fans, media, or neutral observers to assess who's actually being reasonable in these negotiations. Are the players asking for too much too soon, based on one outlier year? Are the owners crying poverty while actually raking in cash behind the scenes? We can't know for certain, because nobody is willing to show us the actual numbers. What we can evaluate, however, is the on-court product and its market performance. And by every single measurable metric available to the public, the 2024 season was absolutely transformative. Average attendance increased by a massive 48% compared to 2023. Television ratings on ESPN platforms didn't just go up, they more than doubled. The WNBA Finals averaged 1.63 million viewers, which is the highest number the league has seen since 2003. Merchandise sales broke every record in the book. Charter flights became the standard for travel instead of the commercial flights. players used to complain about, expansion teams in San Francisco and Portland sold out their season tickets before they even played a single game. That's not incremental growth that you get from slow and steady building. That's a seismic shift in public interest and market viability that happens overnight. And while multiple factors certainly contributed, the single biggest driver was undeniably the arrival of a generational talent who brought her massive college fan base directly into the professional ranks, which brings us right back to the core tension of this entire saga. The players who stand to benefit most from this sudden revenue surge are the same ones who spent the season complaining about the attention that player received. The union is using this financial success as negotiating leverage, yet this is the same union whose members said her fans represented the dark side and constantly questioned whether she'd earned her popularity. You simply can't have it both ways. You can't spend an entire season resenting someone's impact and the media circus that comes with it, and then turn around and use the financial results of that exact impact to demand higher salaries. Well, I guess you can try, but it's intellectually dishonest, and the fans see right through that strategy. Stephen A. Smith's advice to the players earlier in the year was incredibly smart. He told them to continue fighting for what they deserve. He said to be reasonable about where the lines are drawn in negotiations. But most importantly, he said to ride the wave of whoever's driving popularity, whether it's Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese or anyone else. Because ultimately, that rising tide lifts all boats. The problem is, they didn't follow that advice during the season at all. They actively fought against the wave instead of riding it, creating unnecessary drama. Now we're heading into an off-season where the new CBA negotiations will determine the league's entire future. The players are signaling they are prepared to strike if they don't get what they want. The owners are reportedly frustrated with what they see as unrealistic demands based on a small sample size of success. And this revenue-sharing announcement sits right in the middle, used as a pawn as both sides try to control the narrative. Here's what I think actually happens in the end. The league and the players will eventually reach a deal because both sides have way too much to lose from a work stoppage right now. The 2025 season has too much momentum behind it to waste on a labor dispute. Expansion is bringing new markets and new revenue into the fold. Television contracts are up for renewal, which is where the real money is. This is literally the worst possible time to shut down operations and alienate the new fan base. But the deal will likely include significant salary increases and improved conditions for players because the financial reality has fundamentally changed. The league did hit that revenue threshold. That is a fact. New money is flowing in from every direction, and whether the owners want to admit it or not, they can't go back to the old model where players made poverty wages while the league claimed it was doing them a favor just by existing. The question remains whether anyone involved will actually acknowledge the specific catalyst that made this financial transformation possible. Will Caitlin Clark get credit from her peers for changing the economic landscape of the league? Will the union leadership admit that one player's impact was disproportionately responsible for this revenue surge, or will everyone continue pretending this was a collective achievement that happened organically? Based on how the 2024 season played out, I'm betting on the latter. The league will take credit for making smart business decisions. The players will claim their talent and hard work earned this windfall. And the uncomfortable truth about who actually moved the needle will remain unspoken in official statements. But the fans know the truth because the numbers don't lie, and $8 million in revenue sharing after 28 years of losses didn't happen because the league suddenly figured out how to market itself perfectly. It happened because one player brought millions of new fans who'd never watched the WNBA before in their lives. That's not an opinion. That's a documented reality reflected in television ratings, ticket sales, and merchandise revenue. So congratulations to the players on hitting that revenue threshold. You absolutely deserve to share in the financial success of the league you built. But maybe, just maybe, show some gratitude to the person who made it financially possible this year. Because without her, you'd likely still be flying commercial and waiting for that first revenue sharing check that might never come. What do you think about this situation? Should the WNBA players publicly acknowledge Caitlin Clark's specific impact on this revenue surge, or is it fair to frame this as a collective achievement? Drop your take in the comments below and let me know if you think the league will actually show those financial statements or keep hiding behind vague announcements. Hit that subscribe button because these CBA negotiations are about to get messy and we'll be breaking down every development as it happens.